everybody. Good morning, all you horned frogs. Go frogs. Whether it's the morning time and you're taking a little break and wanting to read a book, or maybe it's nighttime and you're getting ready to have your bedtime story, whatever time it is, it's a perfect time for you to read with me. I'm so glad you're here with me. I wrote this book just a couple years ago, and it's called Theodore the Turkey Who Found a Zoo. So how many of you have ever seen a wild turkey before? How many of you have ever been to the zoo? I bet there are a lot of hands that go up there. Well, this is a story about a turkey who is looking for friends. He's looking for people who are just like him. And he happens to live near a zoo. And you may be wondering who this is. This is Theodore. This is my friend Theodore, and this is who the book's about. So he decided, I thought it was a really good idea for him to be here too while we read this story. If you have a copy of this book, then go get it and read it with me. And if you don't have a copy, at the end, I'll let you know how to get one. This is Theodore the Turkey Who Found a Zoo by Allison Speer. That's me. And it was illustrated by Bobby Ligon. The illustrator, as you probably know, is the person who draws the pictures. And what I like about what he did was he put all these little turkey tracks leading you into the book. This is one of my favorite parts of the book because I get to say who I wrote this book for. And it's for my daughters, Caroline and Casey, my daily inspirations for pretty much everything, which they are. I bet you're that way for your parents. So let's see what happens with Theodore. Oh, what a pretty neighborhood. Maybe your neighborhood kind of looks like this. There once was a turkey named Theodore who lived in a lovely neighborhood. His home was nestled among beautiful two-story houses, big magnolia trees, and straight sidewalks up and down the streets. Look at Theodore. He's got on boots. Because, lots of people in Texas, we love our boots. When Theodore walked along those sidewalks, all the people who lived in the cozy, charming homes would say, "Hello, Theodore," or ask, "How's it going, Theodore?" He would gobble back, hoping for an invitation inside, or maybe to be asked to join a game of soccer. Look at that. He's even got soccer shoes on. He wanted so badly to live in one of those homes, to call it his own. The people were friendly, but only with a wave that said, "Hello," not a wave that said, "Come inside." You know those kind of waves, right? One day, as Theodore was strolling and strutting through the homey, restful neighborhood, he heard a loud roar. What is that animal? Intrigued, he followed the sound through the gray pathways. He crossed a busy street. He kept following the roar because he was so curious. Maybe just a little frightened, but mostly just curious. Have you ever felt that way before? I know I have. Finally, Theodore's path led him to a large gate that read, "City Zoo." Now, side note, turkeys who live in human neighborhoods read the newspapers that lay on sidewalks in the early morning, so they become quite fluent. You ever seen the newspapers that they throw in the early morning and they leave them on the sidewalks? Well, that's what happened with Theodore. And look over here, there's a little bench with the newspapers right there. He paraded up to the ticket window to pay admission, but the ticket seller looked down at him and said, "How long have you been on break? Get back in your exhibit and start gobbling." Theodore cocked his head to one side and blinked. He blinked again. And then he thought, hey, free admission. So in through the turnstiles he went. I bet you know what a turnstile is. That's when you go through that little thing that goes around and counts that you're inside the zoo or the entertainment park or wherever you are. Theodore came upon an exhibit full of zebras. Look at those silly zebras. I love the way Bobby drew these crazy zebras with these big blue eyes. He hopped up on the cement wall and then stepped up onto the soft grass. He thought, maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. Perhaps this is my neighborhood. Love your stripes, he said to a nearby zebra who was chewing on the soft grass. But the zebra slowly looked up, rolled his eyes, and huffed. Oh, please, Feather Boy, go on and be a bird. This spot is for stripes only. Wasn't very nice. So Theodore skittered back from the grass, stepped onto the cement wall, and leapt onto the wide, bumpy path, looking for the bird exhibit. Okay? Now you remember Theodore can read, right? So he says, "Penguins," Theodore read aloud as he walked up 1, 2, 3 steps and entered the chilly, dim room. He saw black and white birds, waddling, diving, eating fish, and swimming with friends. Birds, he said to himself. Maybe this is my home. Kind of makes sense. Oh my goodness. Look at those crazy penguins. And what do they have around their necks? They've got little matching red scarves because, you know, when it's cold outside, sometimes we put a scarf on to keep our neck warm. Theodore stepped up to the thick glass window and tapped his beak. Tap, 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 tappity tap. "Hey," he announced, "how do I get in there? Birds of a feather stick together, right?" I wonder what they're going to say. Birds. And then he watched as the penguins toppled over like bowling pins. Laughing, giggling, howling bowling pins. "You gotta be kidding," one chubby penguin laughed. "We ain't birds. We can't fly." Then he pointed his wing toward Theodore and called to his friends, "Hey guys, he thinks penguins can fly." Look, you can see their reflections in the water. The rest of the penguins laughed even more and laughed and laughed. Theodore slowly stepped away from the thick glass and made his way back down the steps out to the wide, bumpy path. But he wasn't really strutting anymore. His eyes were focused on his feet below him, and he watched them move one in front of the other. "Guess that's not where I belong either," he thought. He doesn't look very happy. He heard the sound that originally led him to the zoo. "It's a sign," he told himself. "Maybe this is where I belong." So he straightened his feathers and wiggled his waddle and picked the flecks of dirt from between his toes and gobbled his loudest gobble, 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 gobble to the large animal lying in the grass. Standing on the bench that overlooked a vast plot of greenness and a sun-covered plateau, Theodore prepared to introduce himself, certain this was where he belonged. "Hello, I'm Theodore, and I heard your call from a mile away. I'm certain that you and I are one of a kind. We both have beautiful clothes, majestic calls, and it looks like you enjoy sitting in the sun, just like me. Mind if I stay?" Now look right there, how the illustrator just put a little peek, a corner of what kind of animal that might be. I bet you know what it is. Whoa. Look at that lion. Very majestic. The lazy lion raised his large head and yawned so that Theodore could see his many white, sharp, pointy teeth. Then he licked his lips with his fat pink tongue and spoke. "Theodore, you'll be wise to know that you do not have a mane like mine." Then the lion shook his head back and forth so that the fur surrounding his face fluffed and flurried like the petals surrounding a sunflower. Now if you think about a sunflower and then you look at this lion's mane, they're kind of similar. "And unless you have an appetite for meat," the lion said as he started to stir and stand, "then you'll want to find your way out. It's dinner time and I'm quite hungry. Roar!" I think I'd be getting out of there. Although the lion didn't laugh at him and he wasn't rude, Theodore took the hint and thought it best to exit quickly before he became an early Thanksgiving meal. Because what do we usually eat at Thanksgiving? "Where is my home?" he wondered. "Where do I belong? No one looks like me, sounds like me, or even wants to be my friend." Theodore waddled back onto the bumpy road. Feeling dejected and rejected, he began to wander again. He must have been watching his feet, one in front of the other, because he suddenly bumped into a tree. Now look here. I think that's a tree? What do you think it might be? I don't know. Let's find out. Only it wasn't a tree. It was the long, lanky leg of the zookeeper man. "Hey there, Turkey," the tall man said. You look like that gobbler who lives in the neighborhood up the street. People call us about you all the time. They think you belong to us, but I always tell them the turkey's turf is not here in our territory." Theodore and the tall man began to walk and talk. They walked and talked, and they talked and walked. Oh, I love this page. All the pretty blue colors. That day, Theodore and the man became friends. Every time Theodore would leave the zoo to go back to the streets with the cozy homes, the man stared at his beautiful plumage. That's a fancy word for display of feathers. The man stared and thought. He stared and thought. The next few weeks, Theodore began making weekly visits to see the zookeeper man. He knew they weren't the same kind, but that didn't seem to matter. They liked each other. They were friends. One day, when Theodore visited the zoo, always free of charge, walking the bumpy path with his tall friend, they stopped in front of a small little corner of the park next to a restaurant. It was far from the snobby zebras and the pesky penguins and the lazy lion. "I have a surprise for you, Theodore," the tall man announced. Theodore looked ahead and saw a fancy wooden sign. It read, "Theodore the Turkey, resident of the city zoo." Now, the word resident, maybe you can ask whoever you're with what the word resident means, because you are a resident of something. Theodore was so delighted that his plumage plumed and his gobbler gobbled and his eyes lit up like the stars over the vast Texas night sky. He had found a neighborhood, a place he could call home. One evening, after all the guests had left and the zookeepers had clocked out, a few of the penguins waddled over to his yard. They asked him to teach them how to read. Look at that. It looks like this guy's going, "No, you go first, you go first." What Theodore wanted to say more than anything in the world was to remind them that if penguins can't fly, they certainly couldn't read. He started giggling. He started giggling and gobbling. And then his memory took him back to a time when his eyes followed his feet down the path. A time where he had no home and he felt alone. He never wanted anyone to feel like he did that day. How do you think he felt that day? Do you remember? He looked at the penguins. He strutted and strolled, and he strolled and strutted. Then he pointed to his sign and said, "This is the letter T. T stands for Theodore, and that's me. Maybe not everyone can fly, but just about anyone, even a penguin, can read. Look at that, they're in front of a chalkboard and he's teaching them how to read. Fish, swim, waddle. Those are pretty good words. The end. I am so glad that you came to read this book with me today, and I want to tell you a little surprise. So come here, come a little closer. If you would like your very own Theodore book, you can go right here to this website, allifishpress.com, and you can order one. Or you can find it on Amazon or the TCU bookstore. Lots of places where you can find Theodore. Thanks for reading with me, little horned frogs, and I hope you have a wonderful sunny day. Bye.